back to inner city New Haven. We lived in the Hill, which was very flat, but it was called the Hill. And a few more stories. After one break-in, I had to go down to the police department to see if I could identify the man that I had seen. And a few days afterwards, Joel started having nightmares about Mother being in jail. A friend of ours who was a social worker started asking, well now, is he having trouble at school? Maybe there's some trouble in the family that he's internalizing and having these scary dreams. And then I told her, well, maybe it's related to the fact that we had a break-in and Mother had to go down to the police department and said, oh, his nightmares are about real things. Life is real every place, but life was especially real in the inner city. There were the sirens in the middle of the night, almost every night, because we lived between the hospital and the ambulance barn. When our friends would come to visit and stay overnight, they said, what was going on there? Well, that's what happens here every night. In retrospect, however, the fears were not overwhelming. It was all about the people and their needs. We lived within our means on a small salary, actually, but in juxtaposition to the people in the neighborhood, I mean, we had running water and electricity all the time, and with their absentee landlords, sometimes they didn't. And actually, the children thought that we were the library because we had so many books in our house. It was important to be part of community organizing, and Mark, when he was about 10, remember, was invited to the victory party for the mayor of New Haven because he'd been involved in politics. In fact, his mom and dad weren't invited to that particular gathering. When you live in the inner city, you have to be involved in politics. There's no option because it's a matter of survival. So we were called to ministry in the public world, which is, I think, the ministry of everyone. But for us, it was a daily matter. If the people that we lived and loved would be able to survive. The Redevelopment Corporation was intent, from our perspective, to seeing that perhaps we didn't survive, of moving us out. Who knows where the poor people would go, but moving us out to more important things. They would have meetings, and they wanted people to come, but really just so they could count heads and then report the neighbors had been consulted. Well, of course, we weren't consulted, but if we showed up, they could put down the numbers that we had been there. We were sometimes bridge people between white folk and African American and Puerto Rican people in the neighborhood. One night, Burton was speaking up on behalf of the neighbors, and the redevelopment people said, "Save your preaching for Sunday, Pastor." Well, the people who were there, who wanted Burton to be their leader, said, "Don't you talk that way to Pastor Everist. Don't you talk that way." They wanted him to be respected because they had respect for him, and we had respect for the people. And we wanted we just want some respect. It's a common theme of everyone. There are a lot of gifted people in our area who could teach us a lot. I remember Tony Dawson, who at that time was about 12, and then he grew into his teenage years. And he actually worked of helping tend one of the neighborhood properties for an absentee landlord. And if sometimes we wanted to read the mood of the neighborhood or know who we could trust, so we just asked Tony and he would tell us. Years later, I found out he became a councilman in the city of New Haven. Respect, community, I think that's the call of God for us all in the church and the church's mission in the public world, to respect the people that God has created and the communities in which we have been placed, and to help create community. But that doesn't mean letting people just do whatever. That's not respect. I remember one time Mark's two good friends lived across the street, Roger and Vaughn, and Mark had a bicycle. We didn't have anything that was ever new, but it was okay used bicycle, and Vaughn was riding it down the street. Well, some bigger kids came on and just took the bike right off of Vaughn and stole it. But it didn't do any good to call the police because our neighborhood was redlined, which means for insurance policies and police matters, we were kind of written off. We would have to fend for ourselves. So I got Mark and Vaughn and put them in our VW bus and said, if you were going to steal a bike, where would you take it? And they said, well, down to the discount store about a half a mile away. So we drove over there, and here are these teenage kids with Mark's bike. And I just jumped out of the VW and grabbed the bike and put it back in the VW and drove home. That may sound strange, but it was the way to protect ourselves and each other. One more funny story in that way. Our backyard, which was dirt, we had a little, plastic swimming pool for our three boys, and they were playing out in it one night. Right, we had a fence and shrubbery between us and the church, and I was getting them out and bringing them in to put them in the bathtub, and I sort of emptied out the swimming pool and hung it over the fence while we went in to get their pajamas on and so on. Well, I looked out the bathroom window, and sure enough, the pool was gone. And so we quickly had the boys in their pajamas, and I ran out, and here's my three little boys running after me in their pajamas. And we started across the parking lot and went around the block on Asylum Street. Yes, that's the name of the street, and up toward Congress Avenue. And it was a hot summer night, so everybody's sitting out on their porch. And as soon as we start going up the street, other kids start following us too. It went that way, lady. The pool went that way. And by the time we got up to Congress Avenue, here comes somebody with the pool back around. My cousin took it. My cousin took it. So we have the little swimming pool, and we start back. People are cheering. Yeah, you got it. You got it back. So the whole idea of helping people yes, with their property, but more with respect and caring for one another. It's not so much a matter of protecting people from one another, but really helping them build communities of care. And that story is an important one in our family. Actually, our children were never beaten up in the inner city. Once one of them got beaten up here in Dubuque, but they were never beaten up because they watched out for each other. We lived right next door to the church, and then beside that, across the parking lot, was Christian Community Action, a neighborhood group that helped with housing, with food. It began as an ecumenical agency, is still going on today, with the neighborhood dialogues of the ecumenical movement. And our lives were very closely connected with Christian Community Action. Some of the young people from the Divinity School lived there and helped with it as well. And we had a gathering of food every week in our congregation, and on Monday morning our kids would take it in their little red wagon over to Christian Community Action. So they were very much part of serving and helping with people. It was part of our daily ministry. Respect for the people, wonderful people, not letting people rip each other off, building community, building people's gifts, empowering them to claim their own voices, working for justice, and helping in open opportunities for people. That was the ministry that we were called to in those days. We are committed to public education for all children. And each year, the teachers would tell us, oh, your children have such gifts, maybe you should put them in the private school. And we'd say, well, we could do that, but what about all the other children here in the public school? That won't happen for them. We want all of the children to be educated well. Taking our children out will not help all the other children. Well, Welch School was at the corner up on Congress Avenue, and it was a condemned school. If somehow the city officially condemned the school, then they didn't have to legally provide any services. So there's no lunch. In fact, Mark was about in 4th grade before he said, oh, I heard about a subject called physical education. They never had that, or art, or music. Burton and I, on our 10th wedding anniversary, I remember, were part of the neighbors cleaning up the glass from the playground at the school. Because there wasn't music, and I really believe that particularly little boys need an opportunity to learn to sing before their voices change. So I asked the school principal if I could start a boys' choir, and so I did. I was, lay leader, a volunteer, but I was respected, and we gathered children and boys, and I taught them music. There was a member of the congregation who worked at a purse factory where they had lots of different colors of scraps of vinyl, black and camel colored and gray and brown. And she gave me all those scraps, and so I sewed little vests for the boys so that we really looked special. And we went to sing at a nursing home and so on. Uh, one time I really wanted the boys to have the opportunity to sing at Yale Divinity School. I was a student there by then, and so we arranged to have some transportation and take them all up to Yale Divinity School to sing for daily chapel. We sang some songs from Godspell, I remember, and Henry Nouwen was preaching that day, and he loved the children. They all loved the children singing, but Henry Nouwen, I think, didn't quite understand where these children had come from, because after they sang, he said, "Would you like to come to coffee hour?" Well, I was hoping that I would just get all the children back to the school as quickly and safely as possible, but the children all said, "Oh, of course we'd like to come to coffee hour." So it was in the, well, rather a lovely room with chairs around and coffee pot and so on right after chapel. So all these boys from the inner city go up there, and I just kind of held my breath. But here was the coffee line, and they all went through the line and took their little cup with coffee and drank it just like this. I was standing near a colleague, and I said, "This is not how it is back home." And he said, "But Norma, the boys aren't at home."